What I'm here to talk about mostly is stuff that you can actually do, but what that slide is referring to is I'm actually going to pick up on the things that I was talking about in the last session here in January. The timing of that was really bad because Google have introduced the biggest change that they've ever made in e-commerce tracking, but in January I couldn't tell you about it because it came out in June or July. So I'm going to spend a little chunk in the middle on that. But as ever, I want really to talk about stuff that you can do now with your existing data to make improvements to your site. That's the usual about me slide. It basically is getting across the idea that I've been doing this since Amazon looked like that. And what this is optimizing websites using anything I can. Really, I like customer feedback surveys and things like that far more than I like GA data. I like usability tests, anything I can get. But here today I'm going to mostly talk about GA. I'll also mention that I tweet a lot about this type of stuff, but last time we established that very few people here actually have time for Twitter. So what I'm trying to do is get into the habit of putting some of that stuff into a newsletter. So an email, very simple email. There's a link, you can go and sign up for it. There are various other links and things in this presentation, but you can download it afterwards, so you don't really have to note any of this. Some of the tips are terribly boring, so I'll show you a terribly boring one. This is something you just need to go and do, which is GA has now got this ability to filter out all the automated bots and spiders that are crawling your site. Well, not all of them, but an awful lot of them. And these things are inflating your page views, your sessions, giving you inaccurate data, actually forcing your conversion rate down artificially. So you get yourself a little boost by turning this on because it'll knock off some of your sessions, but your conversion, your transactions will stay the same. It's just as simple, just go and do it. Anyway, and when you make those changes, here's the power user tip, click save, because Google Analytics still has the user interface from hell, as in that's right down the bottom of the screen and everybody forgets to click that button. So, what I'm here to talk about really most of the time is stuff that you can actually do now. So with that in mind, I'm afraid we have another sort of raise your hands type session coming up. I'd like to know which parts of the online activity you're actually in control of in-house. So I'm going to ask you about 4 different things. I'll start with the obvious example, which is PPC. If you actually log into AdWords yourselves and do this, and don't outsource it to an agency, please stick your hand up. We do have some. Okay, cool. Same thing for SEO. So who's in charge of actually doing all their keyword research and backlink building and so on? We have a few more. Right, email gets a bit tricky. I'm not talking about segmentation of lists. Maybe you send them out to somebody like More2, and maybe you use somebody like Screen Pages to actually do the design and send them out for you. But who actually gets to sort of devise the campaigns, work out what's going into the emails, what the promotions are, what you're linking to, that type of thing. So who does that? Right, that's an awful lot more. And finally, yeah, this is 4, isn't it? Finally, when it comes to actually working with Magento, your products, so we're talking about uploading new products, the product descriptions, the attributes, choosing what's going on the home page, all that type of thing. Who does that in-house and who outsources it? Right, 2 hands from over here. That's very much what people do in-house, which is what I sort of predicted, but I did just want to check because I was a bit uncertain about some of that. So what I'm going to talk about is basically 2 areas that you do in-house. Lots of people here do stuff to do with email, and nearly everybody in here who's got a site does all the trading of the site, the merchandising, that side of thing in-house. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And the big GA change really mostly affects the second bit. Suddenly, this thing called enhanced e-commerce that's come out, at long last, after heading for 10 years since they did anything dramatic with e-commerce, suddenly has lots and lots of information which is relevant to e-commerce sites. So we'll get on to that now. The first thing is email. Christmas is coming up. This is a hypothetical question. You don't actually have to answer this. You just have to think in your mind, what is the most common error, do you think, on checkouts? On your checkout, perhaps. Have a think about what it is. I believe you should be tracking this, because if you track the error messages on your site, you get to know. So here is an example of what it is. The top of that list is a mandatory field, which I've obscured to preserve embarrassment from the merchant involved, who's not in this room anyway. It's title field. That appears to be the biggest issue on that, is insisting that people put Mr. or Ms. or whatever. The second is the one I think a lot of people would have guessed, is failing to log in, passwords wrong. But the truth is actually lurking in items 3 and 5. It's this thing called email already exists. It's 2 different versions of the same error message. You add those together, and that's actually the biggest error on that checkout, and I've actually seen this somewhere else as well. Figures I've circled over on the right are the exit rate. It's the biggest of the errors. So 10% of the people who got any error in that checkout abandoned completely because they got in a complete tangle over trying to create an account with an email that already exists. In the case of this, in this particular example, what we did was they drilled in and found out where they were coming from. They're coming from email. In our worlds revolve around our websites. In our customer world, it's different. Especially at Christmas, you're going to be sending out emails to people who don't know you from Adam. I mean, they do, because they've actually bought from you. That's how they're on the email list, but they've forgotten. And this is a very, very common experience, it turns out, is that people forget they've got an account created. They come along, they try and log in, they can't, they think your site's broken, they go. It's very solvable. You can solve this. 0 cost, really, apart from a bit of creative. All you've got to do in every email is make a sales point out of it. For once, you can say with actual honesty that checking out is going to be particularly quick and easy because you've already stored all your details. Just log in as. Just stick this into your emails. And I believe, though I'm only trialling this, we only discovered this really during this last year, so I'll only have data on this later on after Christmas, but that will make a big difference. On the subject of email, I like to give people things. So there's a link in there which will allow you to download a dashboard into GA, which doesn't use goals or anything, so this should work with virtually any view that you've got. You click the link, if you're logged into GA, you click the link and it will say which view do you want to import this into. Import it, have a look. On the right-hand side, it's got, I think, 6 different sets of metrics relating to your email campaigns and email in general. The point I want to pick up on is what's on the left-hand side, because this speaks to a subject that every single presentation has talked about, so I'll talk about it too. Those pie charts, those are comparing the proportion of visits by device on email versus the proportion on other devices. So what we're seeing, the top one, the green bit, it's saying when it comes to email, over 50% are on phones, not all tablets and phones, just phones. 50%, more than 50% on that. Non-email, it's like, in this particular example, a third each. Below are actually the conversion rates for them, and the horrifying, nasty subject is the one in the middle, which is the low conversion rate for mobile devices. So what I'm saying is if you import that dashboard and your figures look anything like that, you've got to have a really, really good think about your email strategy. Time and again, we create emails that are basically, we design them on laptops and desktops. What actually happens is, in this example, if your data's like this, is more than 50% of people see it on a phone. Chances are, if you've got a separate mobile site, for example, in Magento, 2 sites, somebody clicks through on that, they go to the main big screen site, it will redirect them to the mobile one. And if you're not smart about this, instead of them seeing what you expected, which is a beautifully connected bit of CM stuff at the top of the relevant category page or wherever you're dumping them, that's all crafted to go with the email, they're just going to get that poor relation of that, which is a very stark mobile site. So what I'm saying is if your data looks like that, you really need to have a very, very good think about this and start thinking about email as being primarily something that's definitely got to work super well on mobile devices. Anyway, I will move on to the other bigger subject, which is, I'll spend the middle section talking about this enhanced e-commerce, and then I'll move on and start talking about more stuff that you can do with the existing data. The big change in this new version of GA is that suddenly it's all about products. Whenever I'm showing people GA in training sessions, people's eyes tend to glaze over after a while, understandably, but people's interest in this world in which we are pricks up as soon as we start showing information about products. Unfortunately, up to this point in GA, you didn't really have much information about products because the only specific e-commerce tracking takes place on the thank you page. So it's really only talking about products that have been purchased. And as we know, 90-95% of sessions on your sites don't involve anybody purchasing anything. So you knew nothing much about what people were doing with their products up to that point. If you had not the bog standard Magento implementation, if Screen Pages had done something nicer for you, you've got add to cart. You knew about that, which is very, very valuable, but that was it. In this new version, you've got all this lot up the top. So suddenly you have this concept of products being viewed in different places, in context alongside each other, in, for example, category pages, search results pages, Nosto recommendations maybe. I would like to see all those things that Isaac was showing you. If you were smart about this, the functions exist in this new version of GA for recording all that and reporting on it and seeing the impact of this product being seen in this different context. More to the point, for example, seeing which are the ones that people aren't clicking on for some reason. Because when I say clicking on, it has this concept of a click-through rate, which is a click-through rate from one of those pages, one of those multiple views, to the product detail. It has explicit knowledge of what a product detail page is. Similarly, there are dedicated functions for products added, products removed. It then calculates nice little metrics for you, such as the view to book type thing, the metrics that we would have in the offline world or traditional direct marketing. So you've got the saw the detail page and added to cart, or saw the detail page and actually completed a purchase. You've still got products purchased, of course, but you've also got extra information about those. You've got proper implementation of the idea of a category. You've got brands. You can send in extra data if you want, like such as things as costs. You can send in things such as cancellations, refunds. You could, and I'll talk about send in stock levels and so on. So there's a hell of a lot more information in there. And I'll try and briefly run you through what this looks like. I'm using borrowed screen grabs from other people. There's a photo credit on that first slide about this, because we haven't got this running live on any sites at the moment. But that's an example of a product list page. Down the report, down the left, it's listing the product list name. So all of these are bestsellers, apart from number 7, which is a related products area. So we're seeing how often these products were viewed on those particular pages, how often they were clicked on, and what the click-through rate was. And an interesting point that I've highlighted in red up at the top is you can switch this thing round to actually start recording data on where was it on the category page, which spot was it in, because I do know that an awful lot of you, well, Isaac was talking about automating this, which is the best way of doing it, but I do know that quite a lot of you spend quite a lot of time agonizing over the sequencing of your category and subcategory pages and trying to work out what should be shown first. There's also the influence of customers sorting and doing that kind of thing to bring into place. So having all that detailed information about where the products were when they were clicked on could be very, very useful in real life, I think. On the products themselves, for example, you have a list there of products. These are not page views or anything like that. This is products, your stuff that actually is at the center of your website. So there it's reporting how often they were viewed in one of these lists, how often they were viewed as detail pages, the actual product pages, how often they were added to cart, how often they were removed, the purchase information, the unique purchases, those 2 percentages that I talked about, it's calculating those for you. But then there's this rhetorical question. The thing that's missing from that, which is missing from the basic implementation of this, and you need to send it into it. If you go down this route, you should ask to send this information as well, is whether it was in stock or not. Because obviously a key bit of information on whether somebody's going to add to cart is whether it's saying a nice green add to cart button or whatever your colour of choice is, or whether it was out of stock. And certainly if it's out of stock and you're spending money sending to people to it from PPC or whatever, you need to know about it. It's also, if you've got this data, it's actually quite useful to look at situations in which you have what they call a fractured range, i.e. it's got lots of colours and sizes, but actually you've only got a fairly low proportion of them available in stock. Because what you may find in real life happens there is that people give up the will to live trying to find the one that you have in stock. So even though you have got the size that they want, they've given up, they're not going to buy it. So having that data in there, very, very useful. I'll skip through that one because we need to keep going, but that's a different take on the same data. You can have a look at these in more detail if you download them. I've said it's about products. I'm trying to keep going fast. It's also about other marketing activity, very specific to e-commerce, which we have been waiting for ever since GA came out, which is basically internal promotions, vouchers and affiliates. These are very simple concepts which we're all familiar with, but you couldn't track before easily, and now you can. So there's one showing the internal promotions, by which they mean banners, homepage sliders and carousels, promo boxes, you name it, all that stuff that you put on your site and have had a real problem tracking in the past. There are now dedicated functions for tracking how often people clicked on those and what was the click-through rate and what was the revenue associated with it if you want. Same with voucher codes. They actually call them coupon codes in their terminology, but you know what we're on about here. Dedicated functions for tracking those. One other add-in, again I'd say that a lot of is not part of this functionality, but you really need to be doing. I've mentioned error tracking. If you're going down this route, track your voucher code errors and include the detail of what they actually typed, because this is a lovely, easy fix on your site. If somebody has posted a broken version of one of your codes on a voucher code user forum, you know, they've got zeros instead of O's or whatever it is. Heaven forbid that you're actually using such things in your codes, but if you are, you'll be in trouble. People will get it wrong. If you're reporting on it, you can go and see that and configure one that works. And suddenly, you've got more revenue, and you've also quelled a lot of bad feeling, a bad sentiment against your brand in those forums. And finally, of course, the other one that everyone's always been waiting for, affiliate tracking. Dedicated functions for doing that within GA. And that is information that everybody is crying out for. It's probably not perfect. It's not going to do all the debugging that you'd want, but it's a lot better than you've had in the past. The other things that have taken a huge leap forward, I mean, this is another step change for GA, is finally they have two different, very good versions of funnel reporting. This is the one for the whole process. You could not really easily do this in GA, because GA funnels used to be based around pages, page views or events, but they had no concept of all sessions. You could fake it, but it was not easy. This is the version that quite a lot of people like, as opposed to a purely checkout funnel. This is the one that shows the drop-off rate between all the sessions to people who viewed products, to people who added products, to people who went to the basket page, to the people who made transactions. Unlike all the current versions of this, it includes tables underneath where you break the data down. In this case, example, they're showing it by device category, but you can switch that around, show whatever you want, channels, all the usual stuff. These reports are also much more dynamic than they used to be. I'll show you that with the other one. Here is the checkout funnel. I say a decent checkout funnel because this one includes dedicated functions for knowing about whether people were logged in or not logged in, which shipping options they chose, which payment options they chose, all that stuff's in it. And the nice thing about this is you can click on these bits and get more information. So the example in the stolen screenshot is payment methods used. The one I think would be really useful is the delivery options one. You know, because we all know that delivery costs are actually a rather sensitive issue on a lot of our sites. And having detailed information available within the checkout funnel, specific tracking of delivery methods as an explicit thing within e-commerce tracking seems to me to be a very valuable addition. So the snag with that is this is stuff that you haven't got in GA now, and this is not something you can enable with a single click. This is a complete migration to a new specific e-commerce form of tracking. So the questions are, you've got three options. Basically, you can wait for Magento, who at some point we hope, if there is enough pressure will inevitably, ultimately, rather than inevitably, I hope ultimately incorporate all this. I think that may be a long wait. There has been no public announcement, nothing from Magento on this subject, apart from, well, we'll wait and see what the demand is. So the second option, which seems to me the most likely one, is people are beginning to try and produce Magento extensions for this. There are a couple out in the wild already. There's another one that we know of that's under development. The one that I've seen so far doesn't do it quite the way I would want to do it, because they don't use tag management. If you're going to go down any changes, big changes in GA, now is the time to move to tag management. You really, really do need to do that. So I'm hoping for a plugin that combines the lot that I haven't seen yet, I'm not aware of. The third option, it's a possibility, is go it alone and talk to screen pages. This can be incorporated into your standard sites, but it would be quite an expensive process to do, I think. Meanwhile, I will return to the subject of how to work with your data. I'm going to pick up on something I was talking about last time, which is this concept of content grouping. You can do this now, and the reason I'm bringing it up again in this context is because you can get sort of some of that data. You can get a sort of simulated version of a fragment of the data I've just been talking about by doing this. What you've got up on the screen there is, it's basically like the pages report in GA, but instead of showing pages, it's showing groups of pages. Subcategories, product pages, checkout pages, not set, the ones we haven't coded yet, home, subcategory, another subcategory, and so on. So it's broken out like that, which means that you can start doing quite interesting things. One of them, for example, is looking at those product pages. You could drill down into them and see quite handily as a group how they perform. So for example, drill down onto that one. They're all listed out, the specific product pages, hidden here for obvious reasons on the left. What we're looking at here is entrances, if you're driving PPC traffic to them, quite a good technique. Green, bounce rate we're looking at, green to the left, that's good. Those ones down at the bottom, what's going on with them? Not so good. Go and have a quick look. So that's a very easy way of comparing the performance of them. When you group stuff like this, you can also see interesting things. Earlier, Dan was talking, I think, about speed and search. Now, what you can see on this is page speed by the groups of Magento pages. And what you can see there, which is quite interesting and rather alarming, is that the product pages on this site, one lot are at 5.73, one are at 5.02. They are the slowest pages on that site by miles. They're slower even than the checkout. The checkout has an excuse. It's doing a hell of a lot of work. What is going on those product pages? And the answer is, which was touched on earlier, is that these product pages are heaving with third-party bits and pieces, which are slowing it all down. So when you see data like that, bearing in mind what Dan was saying earlier about search, and bearing in mind user experience, that thing's going to take 5 seconds to load. That's an average. Some people are going to get much worse than that. This is not a good idea. So you need to have a look and say, really seriously, how many people are clicking the Facebook like on our product page, and is that the primary thing we want them to do, and so on. Have a good look at that. This is bringing back to the idea of looking at page groups in terms of landing pages. Because we're looking at landing pages, you can calculate things like e-commerce conversion rate for a session that landed there. There's a nice little widget that I turned on that works in Chrome if you're working with GA. It's called Table Booster. And that's giving you all the pretty little red and green flags on e-commerce rate down on the right-hand side. So you can see there that, for example, down at the bottom, one of those specific groups of subcategory works really, really well. If you knew which one it was on this site, you'd understand. But basically, sending people to that is a good idea. Some of the other ones, not such a good idea. There's actually, in item number 2, there's a subcategory, a different subcategory. Not such a cool idea to send people to that one. They don't convert as well, even though it's very, very popular. I'll skip through these two. If you're using content grouping, the GA behaviour flows look very, very nice. A group like this, that one's tablets. This one's desktop. It's the same site, bear in mind. So this is the big screen site, and you can get an idea of how the two compare side by side. But really those things I think still remain pretty much eye candy, to be honest. Now then, I'll try and wrap this up as quickly as I can. This is the important tip for today, to be honest, I think. If you're going to start trading your site and really working with this data, I think now is the time to start biting the bullet and thinking about pulling data out of it automatically into something like Excel or Google Documents, or expensive third-party systems for doing it, but those first two are cheap and familiar to you. And mashing things together there so that you can get some interesting insights out of it right now, which also gives you the possibility of bringing in data from, say, Magento or your back-end systems in other ways, uploading other data into your master spreadsheet, and then you can automate it all. I'll give you an example of this. What this is a way of using current data, depends upon content grouping, and to do this nicely, to fake information on the add to cart ratios for those different product detail pages. So for this to work elegantly, you need to have the product grouping so that you know what the concept of a product page is, because in Magento, the way URLs are set up, it's very, very hard to identify product pages just from all the product pages. So you need to have that information available in GA, which is fiddly, but you can do. And then, so we've got a list of which product pages are being viewed. Then separately, we're sucking into this spreadsheet from GA all the add to carts, because this is a site where the screen pages have gone the extra mile and are tracking add to carts with considerable detail, in fact. So now that we know the two numbers, how many people viewed that page and how many people added it to cart, we've got the add to cart ratio, and you can then use Excel conditional formatting to say, here are some green ones that are nice, and here are some orange and red ones that might be worth your attention. Once you've built something like that, that's the type of thing where you click a button to refresh it, and you've got this information available to you. And I would recommend starting to explore that. There is, of course, in this one, again, information missing. What we haven't got there, and you're not going to get this out of GA, because GA only knows about pages that are viewed. The real horror lurking on your sites are all the pages which are where items are in stock, they're available on your site, and nobody has ever looked at them. So if I was doing this, and I am doing this, so the request has gone into the particular merchant who I came up with this one for, which is saying, what we need is out of Magento, we want to know what are the products that are in stock that are theoretically available on your site, which have no page views, so that we can then throw into this another key bit of information, because that stuff's gathering dust on the shelves in your warehouse, and that is something you really, really need to know about. And using this approach, you can get it. And I'd urge you to do that. The other one that's actually not there is stock levels, which you get at the same time in that same extract from your back-end system, you'd get that. That is a slide from the last presentation about how to do this. You can download these and have a quick look and try and make sense out of it. You can read the links and try and make sense out of it. I've highlighted this time in blue the fact about a good way of doing this would be to add explicit tracking code. So again, the message I'm saying is when you do this type of migration, here's another thing to add to your specification is, and one of those plugins actually does this, one of the Magento plugins I was talking about actually does do this, is we want to send from Magento the fact that this is a category page or a subcategory page or a product detail page, because suddenly you don't have to faff around doing the really complicated stuff to hard code it into GA. If you do want to go down the route of hard coding it into GA, this is where I actually for once do sort of pitch. I do this for a living. This is what I actually do. Money needs to change hands. But we are doing this for various sites at the moment, so it is worth having a look at this. And if you run away in horror, get in touch with Screen Pages and get in touch with me, and I'll sort of get you going on it. Also doing a lot of automatic data exports and so on, and all the other usual custom reports and dashboards and things. But as ever, I will end by coming back to a variation of that first question, which was about what do you actually do on your sites in your day-to-day, week-to-week life? Because the real secret of GA, the recipe for success, is the same as it was last time, but I keep banging this home, is that you've got to think about those tasks, the stuff that you actually do. In this case, mostly I've been talking about trading your site, and ask this key question. If I knew whatever it was, how many people looked at this product and didn't add it, or whatever it was, then I would, make changes, because the key to success with Google Analytics or any of these systems is not looking at a load of historical data about conversion rates for stuff that people that have already come and been and you've wasted your PPC money or whatever it is. It's about actually making changes to the site that will make improvements. And if you aren't doing it programmatically using algorithms, which I urge you to do, as Isaac was explaining, at least this is going to get you going doing it the manual way. And that's it. Thank you very much.